Hi, I want to take you to Sunday, July 14th, a day spent at the beach, a day with fun in the sun. I was with my cousins in a day that many of us enjoy and appreciate. But as we packed up after the long day and I was traveling home, I noticed that my friend was following me and waving me to pull over. 18 years old, life was fun. No stress. I had money. I had friends. I had days in the sun. But as he pulled me over, I'm thinking, what's this about? So as we pulled over, I get out of the car, and he had some look in his face. And if anyone ever had seen this look, it's the look. And I said, what's going on? He said, you need to go home. You need to go directly home. Your family needs you. I said, what's going on? He said, Barb, you just need to go home. He was quite vague, but I was persistent. How do you tell someone that their brother has just died and his best friend? What do you say? And how do you say that? So I asked him again, I need to know what's going on. He said, Barb, John died. I said, then we need to get to the hospital. And he said, he's not at the hospital, Barb. John's dead. He killed himself. We need to get to your family. It's like I heard him, but I didn't hear him. I wanted to get home, but I could hardly push on the gas pedal. I couldn't get there fast enough. I was a mile away from home. It's like I wanted to go there, but I didn't want to go there. I wanted to get back where life was fun. I wanted to get back to the beach. And then in my head, in my crazy thinking as I'm driving, it's like, this is a prank. I'm going to get home. My brother's going to laugh at me and say, just kidding. I just wanted to see if you cared. I was playing all these mind games in my head because it couldn't be real. But as I walked into my family's home, I heard my mother. And if any of you have ever heard their mother's wail, it's something you can't forget. And it's something you want to get out of your mind. And as I heard my mother wail, I knew it wasn't a prank. This was the real deal. She would wail. She would rock. She would moan. And then she would wail and rock and moan. I couldn't take it. But in hindsight, I'm embarrassed to say, I couldn't fix it, I couldn't change it, and I didn't want to be part of it. So I left my family and went to my friends. It was the most surreal thing. How does this happen to a good family, a family of faith, an amazing mom? My brother, 20 years old, what the hell? It doesn't happen. It was like watching this horrible movie and I was in it. I was angry, blameful, guilty, denial, disbelief, all at the same time. Suicide is complex. I'm here today to talk about suicide. And I want to talk about it. I want to talk about it loud and clear. I want to talk about it in a way that I'm not embarrassed about my brother nor my family, and I'm not going to be judged. I couldn't possibly wrap around my mind what my brother was thinking. And there's a part of me that really doesn't want to know. But what I do know is an individual's perception of their life in that moment is their reasons for suicide. I want to say that again. Suicide is an individual's perception of their life in that moment. The day John took his life, I could have been destroyed. But I made a decision that it was not going to destroy me. It changed me forever. It changed our family forever, within moments. But I knew I was going to do something. I didn't know what I was going to do, but I was going to do something. In those days, when I was a lot younger, a teenager then, no one talked about suicide. And it's still a secret in many ways and in many families. We couldn't find a therapist who understood us or this complicated suicide grief. So what I did is I attended my first American Association of Suicidology conference. These were the experts who knew everything, and I thought they could answer my question to why suicide. Because that's the question most of us have, is why suicide? When John died by suicide, there was no one here to help us that understood. But today, many things have changed in some ways. We've evolved to a place where we've done research, we've done trainings, we have statistics, and we talk about prevention. And there's resources for families bereaved by suicide. But what we really lack is the education. One thing that I know for sure, as much as we thought we were alone then, we were not alone. Over 6.9 million people are exposed to suicide every year. Suicide does not discriminate. We know that in 2018, there's over 47,000 people that died by suicide in the United States, about 1,400 right here in our state of Michigan. We know it's the second leading cause of death for our youth, 10th leading cause of death overall. We know that there are more suicides than homicides and more suicides than car crashes. But I want to put this another way, and I want to give you a visual. So if we think about Comerica Park, which is the home of the Detroit Tigers, and we think about this visual of having a sold-out crowd on opening day with 7,000 people waiting in line to see the game. That's how many people died in 2018. We need to talk about this, and we can't hush this word anymore. We need to talk openly because in most places, in gathering places, people are uncomfortable with the word. I was at a conference out in Washington, D.C., and after the conference, I was walking back to my hotel, and I had to get some directions because, frankly, I got lost. So I asked this young person, this woman, if she could guide me to my hotel. And she said, actually, sure, I'm walking that way, and I can walk with you. And as we walked, we talked, and it was a great conversation. And then the question came, I asked her, so what do you do, and what do you do here in Washington? And as we were speaking, she gently and quietly said, I work for the IRS. I said, oh, that's interesting. We talked a little bit more, and then she said, so what conference are you here for, and what do you do? And I softly said, I looked around, and I said, suicide awareness. I found myself softening that word in fear of judgment. And then she said, oh, actually, this is my corner. I'm going to step across the street here. You need to go 2 blocks up, take a left, and your hotel will be on the right-hand side. I think I scared her more than she scared me. Why are we so shamed about this word? Why is there a stigma surrounding it? And sometimes when the media talks about it, they talk about it in a very dramatic way. And sometimes in the movies, oftentimes it's all about glamorizing suicide. There is nothing to glamorize when we talk about suicide. When we talk about it, we need to educate, because the majority of suicides are preventable. We just found, if you may have heard, that the University of Michigan did a study, and what they found is that connectedness is the #1 protective factor for suicide. And if we think about the time in this pandemic and connectedness and how it might be relative to suicide, I think that we've really connected, and it's really a prevention. Thinking about COVID-19 and how we continue to hear that we're all in this together, well, we might all be in the same storm, but we're all in a different boat. We have different equipment, different experience, different levels of water and barriers. Suicide is individual, and it's unique to each person. COVID isn't affecting everyone in the same way. I worked with a person who was chronically suicidal, and he said, Barb, all this talk about depression and people having anxiety, he said, I kind of like it. I thought that was kind of an odd statement. And he said, you know, I think for the first time, hearing people talk about it openly, it's like people finally get me. He said, I don't want people to feel what I feel, but it's nice to be understood. I think for the first time, this young man finally felt understood and connected and not so alone. People are individuals with different needs, but one thing we all have in common, or most of us have in common, is the need to be understood and connected. How might you connect with someone who's struggling with their mental health? We've been hearing a lot of great ideas for COVID, and how it's relative to how we might be able to help someone who's struggling with their mental health or isolation. To not just be a bystander, but to reach out, make that phone call, take a walk, send a message, send a card. We're using telepsychiatry and telehealth to remove the barriers for people who are needing help and hope. These are simple yet effective tools that can work for suicide prevention. COVID-19 is teaching us a lot about humanness. It's been a game changer. We flattened the curve sooner than later because we took precautions. We wore a mask, we stayed our distance, we washed our hands. We had many scientists and healthcare providers working together to find the best treatment and prevention programs and plans. The rates of death were horrendous, but they were not what we anticipated because we worked together. Everyone plays a role in suicide prevention as well. We need to listen to people and remind them that they're not alone. We want to help. There is hope, and I'm willing to talk with you about your struggles. Let me sit with you. These are simple yet effective tools for preventing suicide. We need education for healthcare providers, funds for research and treatment facilities. We need trainings for families, educators, faith communities, for our faith communities. And we need to really encourage and support Zero Suicide Initiative. It's been effective around the world. We need to make sure that it's effective in every state and every county. Experts in suicide are telling us that we can expect a 34% increase in suicides following the COVID-19. We have time to prepare. If we know we expect 34%, but what we know historically is when there's been a crisis, that the rates of suicide go down during the crisis because people are showing up, they're coming together, they're supporting. We have means that people need to bring them hope. But then 2 years following the incident or the crisis, what happens is the suicide rates will tend to go up if there is financial distress, bereavement, and disconnect involved. If we are anticipating a 34% increase of what we already have lost, why are we not doing something and why are we not preparing? I live in Michigan, so we have not only been connected or affected by COVID-19 right now, but currently we got hit with the floods and a tornado. Thousands of people have lost their homes and precious belongings. Devastation at its best and hopelessness for many. The good news is there was thousands of people volunteering and showing up to help. We had a warning. The outcome, there were no deaths. There were no deaths because people had a warning. They knew the dams were breached and there was potential for flooding. The flooding would be coming soon. We were asked to evacuate. And my home, we were downriver, so we had a little more time to prepare. People were able to flee their homes for safety, take some of their precious belongings. We had time to pack. The schools had opened their doors for shelter, so people had a safe place to go. Nursing homes had to evacuate. We had medical care waiting and prepared for them within hours to make sure that they were safe. If we can do this in hours for tens of thousands of people, we have the opportunity. Why would we wait? This is an opportunity to prevent deaths and injuries. We know how to listen. We know there's suicide prevention plans out there. We just have to use them. In our family, we were ignorant to suicide. We didn't talk about it. We didn't educate ourselves. And we were in denial in an odd way. I'm here to encourage you to start this conversation with your own family. Don't deny that it could happen. We encourage all people to educate yourself, to prepare yourself for that one individual, that one person that you might come in contact with that might be having thoughts of suicide. Do you know how to respond? Would you be comfortable hearing their story of suicide? Or would you say something like, "Don't talk so stupid"? Or why would you do that to your family and guilt them to living? Or would you be comfortable in connecting them to life? For many people, it's a natural response, and it's comfortable to hear that story of suicide and to just sit. But for other people, they need to practice and to learn this life-saving tool that many people have learned and has been effective. CPR saves thousands of lives every year. Simple life-saving measures. You recognize when someone might be having a heart attack and you respond in a life-saving way. We can save thousands of lives learning CPR. In my family, we have heart disease. We each learned how to do CPR. If you've ever taken a training, it was to learn the signs and to respond. Most people with thoughts of suicide will have a warning sign or behavior change. Some do, but some don't. I encourage you to learn these signs. Some people, however, hide behind a mask. They pretend like everything's okay, life is good, they have the world, they're making money, they're prestigious in the community. Those types of people are really hard to recognize. There are generally clear signs. The majority of people leave you a sign, but they're not always recognized because we don't understand them. You are 10 times more likely to come in contact with someone with thoughts of suicide than someone having a heart attack. So a few hours of your time, you could help us decrease these numbers and prepare for what they're expecting in the near future. I challenge you to take action when you can. My family did not get the time or the chance before it was too late. So instead of just doing awareness, let's go one step further and let's learn the tools. Be an advocate. 90% of people that die by suicide have a diagnosable mental illness. We need to better prepare our mental health care. We need to better prepare people, both in our mental health and our behavioral health, or our healthcare system, to understand what we need to help. We need to our insurance companies, our employee assistance programs to minimize the costs, to remove the barriers for people reaching out and getting help. Mental health is as real as physical health, and we need to treat it that way. The value of integrated care is treating the whole person. I challenge you to register today for a training. There's access to the SPRC website, which is the Suicide Prevention Resource Center, which is a national website for all of the quality trainings that you could sign and register for. So find a training that fits your needs and your level of need. I can't change what happened, but I can change the way we do things because it happened. I started a Survivors of Suicide support group 30 years ago to be there for those people bereaved by suicide. So it's been 30 years ago since I've been working in this field, and every day we're seeing change. I'm a certified suicide prevention trainer and advocate, speaking to over 150,000 people around the country. I developed an aftercare training so that I can train the first responders on how to be helpful for the families on scene. I'm instrumental in writing 2 suicide prevention plans at both state and local levels. My experience in being notified of my brother's death, I wanted to make change for other people. So we have a victims advocate group at our sheriff department where we go and assist the police officers at a scene to bring comfort for families and help them navigate these early hours of grief. We also have a loss team, local outreach for survivors of suicide. These are wonderful people trained by Dr. Frank Campbell and sitting with people early on, peer-to-peer, who've lost someone to suicide to bring them hope. Most recently, I was appointed to the Governor's Suicide Prevention Commission. It's an honor to be a voice. I appreciate after all of the trainings that I do, or many of the trainings that I do, of how effective they can be. Getting emails and texts and phone calls from our young people, our middle schoolers and high schoolers. After the training, they've taken a text message of a friend talking of suicide, and they show an adult, and they help save their friend's life because they now know what to do. I'll be speaking on a stage to hundreds or thousands of people. People come up afterwards to share their story of suicide because I've talked about it without stigma and I've talked about it without judgment. So they feel comfortable talking to a stranger following the training to share their story or someone else's story of thoughts of suicide. And they know in the end that I'm going to connect them to somebody in the community that can help take care of them. Because we know that suicide isn't about killing yourself. People don't really want to die. They just don't know what else to do with their pain. I have another story of a mother who said that she had a concern. She didn't have a concern that her daughter had just been isolating and she was sad, but she never connected sad to suicide. After the training, she went home. She talked to her daughter about her sadness and talked about suicide. She asked her, and her daughter said yes, that she had been having thoughts. They cried together, but then they got help together. And yet, there was another dad who had found a note, and he said, you know, Barb, do people just write notes and talk about this for attention? And I said, yes. They have a pain and they don't know how to describe it. They don't know how to ask for help. So they write it out or they talk about it jokingly. Sometimes people don't know how to ask for help. He went home, he talked to his son about the note. His son said yes to suicide, and they got help together. And yet, there was a pediatrician, 30 years in the field, who said, I never had to ask a patient about suicide. I've never had a suicidal patient. After the training, she learned how to ask in a way that was direct and caring. She went back to work. 2 weeks later, she called me and she said, Barbara, I asked my first patient about suicide. I've been caring for him for the past 16 years. He said yes. And she helped take care of all of his needs. I had found purpose for my pain. Asking about suicide is something we teach and encourage. If you have a concern for someone, it's important that you recognize that they need help. If you notice a change in behavior, a change in their life that's causing disruption, they might be doing something like increased alcohol, substance abuse, anxiety, anger, agitation, change in sleep, change in eating. Any behavior change for that individual is an opportunity to have this conversation. Don't deny that it can't happen in your family or your community. I encourage you that if you're having thoughts of suicide now, if you're watching this TED Talk, if you are having any thoughts, please call the 1-800-273-TALK phone number or text 741-741. There are people 24 hours a day waiting to hear from you and willing to help. Suicide does not have to happen. People care and are willing to help. I encourage you today to talk about suicide. And I want to challenge you to pick up the phone, schedule a time to take the training, talk about suicide, and take the training. Thank you.